Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Season Ticket Holders. I'm your host, Dane Lillingston, and I have another very special and new guest for me today. He's actually an A-Leagues super fan, also a West Tigers fan, and used to be my housemate in Sydney, but dogged me and moved to Perth. Patrick Carolan, how are you, mate?
Very good, Dane. How are you? I'm
Good,
calling
man.
pastures.
Yeah, well, it's very different, I know, from Sydney to Perth, mate, but how's it all going?
It's going really well. Yeah, no, loving it here. Been here like a year now, almost to the day. So it's been a lot of fun and kind of just exceeded expectations a bit. Lots to Perth that are some hidden secrets to Perth that they like to keep quiet from the East Coasters.
Is that right? Not like two heads or anything like the North? Like what are we talking about?
No, no, nothing like that. But no, I've traveled a lot of the state going north and south as well, and it's pretty stunning. So, highly recommend to anyone thinking of a big road trip. Come west, see how you enjoy it. Come have a beer with me.
Oh, I'm
Well,
glad it did you a sponsor as Tourism Western Australia. I'm glad.
yeah,
No, awesome. I'm very happy to hear you're doing well, Pat, even though we definitely miss you in Sydney, mate. So great to hear that you're doing well. And the reason I wanted to get you on the show today, because I thought this would be the perfect time. Obviously, the NRL has come out to announce that the 18th team introduced into the competition will be a Perth-based team mixed with the North Sydney Bears. There's not an official name yet, but the Perth Bears looks like a very likely candidate. They was going to come in 2027. Obviously, have just had the success of the Dolphins to become a 17-team competition. The NRL was always talking about expansion into Perth was always the most likely. There was a lot of sort of political juggling with the Premier over there. I know you can tell me probably a little bit more about that too as well, but they did get this over the line. Peter V'landys got this done finally. Papua New Guinea will come in 2028. We'll have a 19-team competition. So obviously very exciting. It's all sort of broken the last week. The ARLC has now met with the NRL clubs. They've told them the plan. It seems like everything's been ticked off on. And the reason I just wanted to get to your brain straight away, you grew up in Sydney. You know the NRL landscape. But firstly, just for the audience, can you just talk us through a little about who you are, why you love rugby league, and specifically as well, why did you choose the West Tigers?
yeah. So I guess I grew up in not a rugby household at all. It was a soccer mad household with my Irish dad just getting me into the Premier League, and then I got into the A League from that, and that was kind of always my main focus. However, growing up obviously in Sydney, and especially in the inner west, you're around footy all the time. At school, everyone has a footy team, so you naturally have a footy team. And for me, obviously, the West Tigers just being down the road from us in Stanmore was
Unfortunately.
unfortunately until this year, but yeah,
True.
we've had a that was the natural choice I think for me growing up, um, and yeah, I remember watching the first grand final for me with was the Cowboys and Benji working his magic, and then since then kind of got more and more into it as growing up. My friends have gotten more into it as well, and then just turning 18, you start going to the pub and footy's on, and you meet more mates who are footy mad, and you live with footy mad housemates, and then before you know it, you're playing fantasy and you're watching 6 games a week.
Super coach, baby. Let's go.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I think uh, obviously living with you, and then I think just through from COVID especially, I grew more and more into league and became a massive fan. If anything, like more than the A League, which used to be my pride and joy. It used to be my whole weekend, and it really flipped. Um, and yeah, then since then, I guess, and we'll get into it more as well. It's been very interesting coming to Perth and realizing how much of that is uh, situational, environmental to an extent, because you can only get so excited and so pumped up about uh, rugby league and the NRL and your own team when you're not around anyone else who's that invested in it as well. So it's been interesting just to see the difference in what a rugby league town is, and what a rugby league town isn't, which is over here.
And I know you and I, and that's a very good point that you make as well about being around other people who support the sport. And you and I spent many a discussion here at the backyard underneath the house with a beer, talking about expansion, crowd sizes. We're a bit footy nerds in that regard. We loved our numbers and how these things work. I know we'd specifically spoken about expansion previously as well. I was always a big Perth fan. I always thought the NRL should do the geographic expansion. I know a lot of people think that Northern New South Wales would have been a better idea, especially with North Sydney Bears. That could have made sense on the Central Coast. There's a lot of people who think the west of Brisbane, because of the big AFL threat they should have there, that would have been a logical step. There's another camp that thinks the South Island New Zealand team would have been the best step. Me personally, I thought was always going to be the best move for the NRL. I want to see it as a truly national competition. I think for me, there's no doubts that's where it should be. We have the Dolphins who are fairly new in Brisbane. Why put another team there, especially when they're not really solid on their feet yet? Why put another team in New South Wales in general? There's just too many teams here. I know there's not one in the north Central Coast where they're talking about. There's a team in Newcastle. I just don't think you need another team there. New Zealand, I think, had a good case, but again, the Warriors are just experiencing this massive growth of success. Why go and eat into what they're starting to build with the corporate sponsorships and those types of things? To me, Perth made the most sense. How did you see it? You're now in Perth. When you found out the news that this was finally going to go ahead, what was your reaction?
Yeah, I think for me, it's definitely a case of the pros overwhelm the cons completely. That's not to say, though, that I think the talk that I've kind of seen and been reading up on is maybe a little bit rose colored glasses in terms of how perfect a fit it is. I think it will just take time and there might be some certain teething issues. Um, you know, I think especially coming after the Dolphins, which has just been an undeniable success for any new sporting franchise, um, you know, this century, they've kind of hit all the benchmarks that they need to hit. But people, I guess, would have to be careful to judge the Bears against that benchmark because you're talking about a footy mad town that was itching for a second team, um, and had the sponsorship and the rivalries and everything ready to go, and the coach and the team, even like a successful team, the start they got off to, I think helped them as well. Really like solidify that brand. Over here, there's a very small but existing rugby league base, and there is actually a decent amount of clubs both in Perth and even just around regional areas like up north. There's a big FIFO community, and there's a few clubs up there, and obviously it's a lot of the East Siders that come here and work in the mines, and they play their own footy. But there actually is a surprisingly big competition in the metro area as well. Is it big enough to, be selling out HBF Park every weekend? My guess would be no. Um, I don't think that should be the goal though of the team. It should just be to get enough people down there, maybe three quarters full around that 15,000 mark, and gradually grow the interest with the non-expats and the non-interstate migrators, because that's the big difference with Perth is there is a lot of New South Welshmen and Queenslanders here that they do have a natural interest in rugby. There is also a lot of British expats and even Kiwis, South Africans, even Irish, like big communities that are willing to give rugby a go. Um, but when you talk to people that are born and bred in Perth and raised here, that interest goes off a cliff. Truly does. Which that was the biggest shock for me, was even just talking to lots of people this week to get an idea of their excitement about the Bears. Some people, wasn't even that they didn't have excitement; they didn't know it was even happening,
Yeah,
and
it's
they
crazy,
tell
right?
them, yeah, it's wild because it's obviously it makes massive, massive news in the NRL world and even just in like the Sydney, Queensland media bubble, but it hasn't hit the locals here yet. So yeah.
Well, I was to say it's crazy too, just even on the exposure, because Western Australia is the only state that doesn't have that News Corp influence as well. Obviously, the newspaper there is run completely differently. I went and had a look. What's it called there? What's your city newspaper?
Oh,
Perth. I got you on the spot. What's it called? It's a Seven West media. I should know that as well. But it's obviously the News Corp media obviously dominates here as well. I know from being with Fox Sports, and obviously the Daily Telegraph, the Cura Mail, they have a really big influence into what those, I guess, the media penetration about how they treat rugby league and just how it all gets out there. Like as far as like news coverage, obviously you don't watch like traditional 6 o'clock news, I'm sure, or anything like that. But is that like one of those things like a AFL in Brisbane where they struggle to get that media attention? Even like if you find it, it might be like 10 pages back, or if you go on a website, it's not really even going to show you an NRL article on the main site of the page.
Yes, yeah, completely. And but it's one of those things where it's a chicken and egg thing of is the lack of media coverage because they don't have a team. And I'd say definitely that's a massive part of it because you do see on the news all through summer, Glory gets a run in the A League, and the Wildcats get a big run on the news, and the Big Bash, the Scorchers as well. They get a huge run. So that is a massive positive about Perth is it is a sport obsessed town. People probably don't realize how big you know sport is in this city. Even just like more minor sports as well, like hockey and aquatic sports. There's just a lot of money in facilities and big open spaces, massive grounds. Everyone plays it sport like a community sport themselves. So that's that will benefit the Bears once they do come into place, and also the locals love to back a winner. So if the Bears can get off to a good start, I think very quickly you'll find like more and more people are willing to just go down to HBF Park and give them a go and see if they like this whole rugby league business.
No, that's a good point. You make plenty of good points there as well. Like you mentioned, HBF Park, so it's about just over 20,000, I think, capacity. So and then I think with the government, there was an original plan. I think Peter V'landys was trying to push for an upgrade, but I don't think that's going to be part of this deal. WA government's going to kick in, I think, $50 million around about. That's going to be the funding model they're going to be working on to get them off the ground. Not like Anthony Albanese and the PNG bid. That's a whole different story. But they obviously got that, and they do have a footprint in Perth. Obviously, we've seen Origin. Origin 2 will be in Perth this year at Optus. They did have that double header a few weeks ago. Now, I saw they only got 31,000, which I thought was a little bit disappointing. I don't know if it was raining, if it was affected or anything. Do you remember that game?
No, it was good weather. Good
Okay.
weather.
Shit crowd then.
Shit crowd, but I think that is the problem with testing, those crowds as using them as benchmarks because it's a double header. Uh, the first time you do it last season, it's a novelty, and there's more of an interest in that. And then the second time you do it, of course, that the casual event goer doesn't go again all the time. Um, I'd say if you kept on doing State of Origin here year after year, you might find it harder to sell tickets rather than easier without a Bears team, just because part of it is just people are event goers that are going to these things rather than regular rusted on fans.
Rugby league people.
That's it.
Well, I delved back into the numbers and the crowds. Now, of course, this isn't the first time you're going to have a team. The first one was the Western Reds, at least in their first 2 years in 1995. They played 11 games. They averaged 13,390. That was their first ever year. Then, of course, this is the same time as the Super League War. So things got a little bit messy at that point. That dropped down to 8,200 in 1996. Then they changed to the Perth Reds aligned with the Super League. And in 1997, they got 8,700. Now, that's obviously led towards them basically being kicked out when the NRL all sort of came back together in 1998, running out of money. The support just wasn't there. Just based on that, obviously the AFL, I believe both the AFL teams, to no surprise, average 40,000 plus. I think West Coast and Fremantle are somewhere up around there. Um, just as far as crowds, though, what would you think would be a good number? You mentioned what 15,000. Is that a realistic number that if they go to HBF Park, they can average 15,000 for the first season?
I think that would be a very successful first season, but like a lofty target to aim for. Um, but it wouldn't be disappointing if they got slightly below that as well. Uh, Honestly, HBF Park from when I've been with like big crowds and small crowds, it doesn't feel like there's 20,000 in there. Even when a big crowd, it looks like there's a big crowd in, and then it gets announced as, 14, 15. So I don't know, maybe some of those, yeah, just 15,000, you're selling most of like the cheap tickets, and maybe there's just like some category A expensive tickets left over for obvious reasons. But that would be a good benchmark to hit, I think. Considering as well that the Western Force play there at the moment, and they're averaging crowds of 7,000, and less even. I think they got their biggest crowd in a long time on the weekend because they've had uh, a surprising run of form this season in the Super Rugby, and that was 8,000.
Okay,
8,000.
so that's a good sort of little barometer then, I guess, of where sort of to expect, right?
Yeah, exactly. Perth Glory as well, they average in the 7,000s too. Um, Obviously, having a shocking couple of seasons, but people are willing to go to sporting events here. They're more inclined to. They don't have to be rusted on rugby league fans or Wildcat fans or Force fans. People will just go for something to do. So I think that will help.
A bit like the Melbourne sort of vibe, how they get behind their events, even though they're not, state of origin, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's it. Uh, but then I guess when you take into one major benefit for the NRL in general of the Perth Bears being related with the Bears is their average attendance across home and away fixtures will be a boost for the league because you'll be getting those extra couple thousand fans ideally in Sydney for the away games as well, right?
Well, that's what I say. You set me up perfectly for my next part because we haven't actually touched on that aspect yet. We're talking all about Perth, but they are going to be linked with the North Sydney Bears. They're a foundation club, 1908. Only the Sydney Roosters and the South Sydney Rabbitohs are foundation clubs that are still in the NRL. I, as a rugby league fan and a bit of a history nut, I love that aspect that they are going to have this link together. Bears are back, baby. Like there's been plenty of fans that have been calling for this for years and years and years. Now they exited the NRL in 1999. They couldn't get it going. They merged with the Manly to make the Northern Eagles from like 2000, 2002. That didn't work out. Basically demoted to lower grades ever since. The fact that they're coming back, it seems like the model, obviously still very early days, that they will split maybe 50-50 their home games in Sydney. You've got North Sydney Oval or further north. And then, of course, it looks like HBF Park. Do you like that association? We've seen it so successful with the AFL and what they've done with the Sydney Swans and Brisbane Lions, how they brought teams like that back, brought a foundation brand to still have that association. So just from being in Perth, I don't know if Perth people would care, but do you think that is good to have that association, just a little bit more chance of success as opposed to just starting from the scratch?
Yeah, 100%. And if anything, that's the big benefit of, the average Perth local not caring is it's not a big deal, and they don't feel like they don't have completely their own team. They'll grow into their interest will grow in this team as the Perth Bears together, rather than you know thinking about wanting their own team from the start. So I think it's definitely the right way to go. Obviously, playing roughly half of their games all season in Sydney, you'd imagine that's just a benefit for all the Sydney clubs, as well as the Bears themselves. I think playing one game in North Sydney Oval is obviously a good way to go, at least one. For me, I don't know if I do any more than that because the point of having a Perth franchise is to play games here and to build the game and the base of support here. You're only talking about potentially 12 home games or 13 home games a season as it is. So how many are you going to take away from Perth? Um, and the other thing with that as well is, uh, just from a league perspective, that extra time slot in Perth, it just works so well. I can imagine myself, watching Sunday footy, 3 games all the way through to the evening, or even like a late Saturday night fixture here and there as well. It just works so well having that extra time slot in Perth rather than, taking more games to North Sydney and accomplishing, like, not solving that problem.
Yeah, and I think that was one thing for the NRL too, right? Like they wanted to have that extra time slot, that flexibility, like they sort of have with New Zealand a little bit at the moment, to be able to muck around with the Friday slots and the Sunday late slots, like you said. Um, Perth Bears, you like it? Is that what we call it?
Yeah, I reckon Perth Bears. Yeah, Western Bears. I don't like it. It's similar to Western United in the A League. West of what? Western of where?
Western
This,
Sydney.
yeah. So no, Perth Bears. It's obviously Perth. Like the stadium's in the middle of Perth. The fans will be from Perth, or they'll be Bears fans as well. So makes sense.
Well, I was doing my research before. They're originally the Western Reds when they were in '95, and that was the big kangaroo. So, I don't know much about kangaroos. Is it the red kangaroo? Is that right?
E- oh,
I did
you got
major
me.
biology.
Yeah,
And then they changed it to the Perth Reds in their final season in '97 when they switched to the Super League. So that was the history of the original Perth franchise. But I think Perth Bears makes the most sense. You don't really have to get fancy with it. If they're going to have this association with the North Sydney Bears, Perth Bears just makes total sense. I like it. Now we have already seen, of course, it looks like there's no going to be official announcement just yet, but I think in the next fortnight to a month, the NRL will get serious about this because if they're coming into 2027, they're going to be able to start signing players really by the end of this year. Now, there's been plenty of chat already, as you'd expect, about who you'd be targeting. The one that would personally break my heart is Payne Haas because everyone keeps talking about the $1 million man. He could be one of the richest players to ever play the game, and he's worth every penny of it. He's just about the best player in the competition right now. Uh, you need a marquee player, right? We saw the Dolphins, even though they had success, they actually struggled. Even though they had Wayne Bennett, they were in an attractive market. They tried to get Kalen Ponga, Cameron Munster, Brandon Smith. There was lots of these players that they're in the market for. Hamiso Tabuai Fido ended up being just about their marquee, but wasn't really a marquee signing. They had plenty of experience. Well, who do you think Perth should target? Because you'd think that they would need a big marquee name, especially being in a market that's not traditionally NRL.
look, I think a marquee definitely helps in any situation. Uh, you need, yeah, a flashy kind of superstar on the pitch to make it interesting for the event goer, the initial event goer, to be converted into a rugby league fan, which they definitely could, especially watching some of the Western Force and the Union here. It doesn't match the excitement level of an average league game at all. So that will happen with I'd say my pick would be a Kalen Ponga, to be honest. Just well, actually, what first drew me to it was he was born in WA,
I did see that
and
during the week. Interesting connection. Yeah.
yeah, which shocked me. And in Port Hedland, and he spent his early years there. So that might also raise the media interest a little bit and give him that extra bit of fanfare. Um, and obviously, he's a magician on the pitch as well, so he could be uh you know a couple of highlight reels of him combining with some of the other players. I think would go a long way to generating some extra interest. But something I also did hear on another podcast, I think it was Hindy actually, he made a good point about the Dolphins setup and where they went really right with the picking their squad is having that experience in the front row and the older, wiser heads to kind of set the standard of for the franchise of this is how we train and this is the expectations we need to live up to, and then signing a lot of younger talent that has the potential to you know become a massive player, someone like a Isaiah Katoa. um, and I think that's very very important for Perth to try and emulate.
No, that's a good point because they got Fleece Kafusi, they got the Bromwich brothers. So the Dolphins did start with a lot of premiership winning representative experience in their forward pack. I think that will be important. Now Billy Moore, Queenslander, the legend that he is, he's of course going to be involved heavily with the Bears. You'd imagine as a director, a potential board position. You would think he's drawn up a hit list of 5 players now. Jerome Hughes was at the top of his list because that would make a lot of sense. You get a classy halfback like that, whether he'd ever leave Melbourne, different story. Payne Haas, like I just touched on, he hasn't signed a new deal with the Broncos. He can negotiate from the end of this season. That'll be very interesting to see. it would really break my heart if he was the one to go. But if you were to build a club around Payne Haas, you know, you could do a lot worse. Like that'd be a good choice. Selwyn Cobbo, of course, as well, hasn't been re-signed by the Broncos, now playing at fullback with Reece Walsh out injured, he's going to put himself right in that window, I think, to be $1 million man because he looked very good at fullback against the Bulldogs the other night. And if he wanted to stay there long term, I would say he would be another. Maybe doesn't have the profile of like a Kalen Ponga, of course, but still absolute gun to build your team around. And his other two were Herbie Farnworth and Angus Crichton. So I think that was more being realistic about who could be off contract than potentially could be five signings. So I like that,
Mm.
man, but I do agree with you though. I think Kalen Ponga would be anyone's just about first pick. He's got the look, he's got the style. The kids want to be him, you know. Like people just love watching Ponga play. I love watching Ponga play, and he's a Queenslander, so you can't go wrong. Um, but yeah, look, it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing. And then as far as the coaching side of it, it looks like it's all signed, sealed, and delivered already. Brad Arthur, that's what everyone's saying. It looks like they've been in discussions with him behind the scenes. I've even heard that at the ARLC meeting on Thursday, they informed the other clubs they had a coach basically ready to go. They didn't name him. He's currently coaching in Leeds in the Super League off contract at the end of the year, so it's all pointing towards the right way to go. I've had a little bit to do with him. He, of course, took the Eels to the grand final a few years ago, had lots of success, then didn't have so much success in those recent years, but really good guy. What do you think of that type of appointment? Because there's not too many big names like your Wayne Bennett sort of sticking out. He would be one to me that I think makes sense.
Yeah, well, as you say, it's I think a matter of who sticks out, and besides Wayne Bennett, your options are kind of limited. And Wayne Bennett's not an option as far as I'm aware. Uh, so yeah, someone who's got taken a team to a grand final, um, is keen to do it as well. I think those are two big boxes to tick. And then besides that, I think it's good that they've, you know, are sorting this out early, and it seems like it's already set in stone. That'll just help speed up the important process for the Bears in kind of starting that signing their squad, because is it 6 months now until they can start signing or players come off contract for the season that they join. So yeah, no, I think it's a completely fine um, decision at worst.
No, no, I like it. I think he's like that type of plan manager too, because you're obviously talking about shifting a lot of young men who grew up playing in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, whatever. He's going to go have to cross the other side of the country to play in a not traditional rugby league state. So I feel like he is the perfect type of person to nurture that young talent who are going to be away from home and do need that helping hand and guidance in someone that's going to be very foreign to them. I think we've sort of covered most of what the crux of what the team's going to be. I suppose you sort of touched on it when we first started talking about it, but I guess the question is, do you think it's going to work long term? Do you think this franchise is going to work in Perth?
Absolutely, yeah. I think long term, it's um, you know on a very very good path to success, and I think a big part of that success will actually be HBF Park, whether it gets renovated or not, or gets a redevelopment. The size of it is perfect for a bit of atmosphere at games and a bit of a cult following as well. Uh, it would be a massive mistake for them to take games to Optus, which is cavernous, at the best of times, and you really do need to fill it up. Otherwise, you just don't get that interest and that local passion. I mean, if you for everyone that watched the Tigers game on the weekend, that just shows what that kind of local, everyone cramped in feel at a footy pitch in a tight game can do.
Yeah.
Um, and HBF has it. It actually is a fantastic ground to watch footy at. Maybe if I had to guess, I'm sure the corporate facilities there aren't fantastic. It does look a bit dated, but every seat in the house is a good seat. And once you do get it to that like three quarters full, it really does feel like everyone's there, and there's a bit of noise and an atmosphere. So that will help. The expat community and the interstate migrants are only growing and in Perth, and that will help it as well. And of course, you know, having Perth having a team in 5 years, the conversations people are having about rugby league in this part of the country is going to be very, very different because, that natural interest of just having the team there, and, you always want your local team to do well. If they can make some finals, yeah, I think we could be looking at, potentially very quick success as well. But just have to remember as well that NRL is in this kind of golden period, I think, where as a league and all the clubs, it's really on a high. Those highs, they don't last forever. Not that I see any kind of downturn coming, but that'll be like the time to judge not just the Bears, even the Dolphins. Um, that's, if their crowds can stack up then, and viewership numbers continue to grow, that will be like the true test, I think. um, but for now, it's they're on a winner because the NRL obviously has some money behind them, the state as well. Yeah, there's just too many things going for it that it would be pretty hard to mess this one up, I think.
No, I like your point about the NRL sort of being in form right now because that's 100% true, right? Like ever since Peter V'landys came in with Andrew Abdo as well, they've done such a fantastic job of, I guess, growing rugby league, which had sort of been stagnant for a long time. You had the Titans in 2007, and then there was a long period there where there was just a lot of chat about expansion. I think there was, probably 15 years plus of just talking about it and always a discussion. But these are the guys who came in and said, no, we're actually going to do it. And then obviously they were on brink of financial collapse during COVID. Then to fight back to where they are now, they've bought all this property around the country in Sydney and Brisbane and in Caxton Street. And they've got money in the bank now, and they're making advantage of it, man. Like they're taking full advantage of it, bringing the Dolphins in. They have been a good success. You can see Suncorp on non-Broncos days still getting 25, 30,000 plus people. It's awesome to see that they can do that. Um,
Yeah,
and now this plan is in place. I agree with you. I think will work, and I reckon this was always the place to go. And yeah, 20,000 person stadium now with that tribalism and the rugby league like a Leichhardt. I love that for now. And then hopefully, if it is successful, then maybe they can get a 30,000 seat upgrade, whatever it may be down the track.
yeah,
That leads me to the NRL as a whole. Then they've decided they're not going to do a 20-team competition for now until at least after the 2032 Olympics. That seems to be the latest bid. That's a blow to obviously New Zealand and Queensland teams do have some bids in there. But look, I'd be pretty happy with that. I think they're going to do PNG in 2028, 19 teams, bit of an odd number, but would you be pretty
okay.
happy? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think one important point to remember as well is if the NRL is confident that a PNG team will be successful, even with $600 million from the government, then my word, a Perth team should smash it out of the park. I think that'll be apples to oranges comparison. So that actually does make me a lot more hopeful that Perth will be a quick success, if PNG is is even going to be viable, let alone successful. So yeah.
Well,
Besides that, sorry, you go.
there you go.
Uh, the so what was your question?
So I was going to get into PNG because I was going to just say, yeah, 600 million over 10 years, right? 60 million a year. Was that the deal?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's crazy. And we didn't even really discuss whether we thought that was going to work. I know we have in the past, but it's going to be an interesting experiment to say the least, right?
it is 100%. And obviously, it seems like there's a bit of uh, you know, other reasons at play for why this has gotten over the line, and that's why the government support has come in. I don't think the 600 million equals it being a viable like success. We'll just have to wait and see how it turns out. But at the end of the day, I think for PNG, if they can just get fans in their stadium there, which they tend to do for internationals, um, then I mean, I'd take that as a win.
Definitely. I love it for the country. I mean, I know it's for political reasons and keeping China out of the Pacific, which is crazy to think about. That's the reason we've decided to expand the NRL.
Yeah,
But the fact that they're the only country in the world where rugby league is the national sport, it is really nice for them. But if anything, you got to feel for the South Island, New Zealand bid, the fourth Brisbane team bid, third Brisbane team bid. Like that's the people who got affected by the NRL deciding to go down that path. Like that's not anyone's fault. And I mean, I think I'd like a second New Zealand team if we were going to go to 20. I think that would make sense and have a little New Zealand origin rivalry. And you could have it maybe 5, 6 years down the track and see if the Warriors can really build and keep the success that they've currently had these last few years. Um, if they were going to go to 20 teams. And then, yeah, I'm not big on another Brisbane team. I know there are people out there thinking that the west of Brisbane is getting invaded by the AFL, but it's too soon for me if you just had the Dolphins. You need to solidify that support, right, before you go there.
100%. And it's like what we said about you. We can't judge the Dolphins in the good years, and mind you, only 2 years into uh, their existence as well. I think you got to give them time to see where they even out. Especially if they have a bad run of a couple seasons not making finals, and all of a sudden a bit of the enthusiasm could go. Um, what does the Dolphins look like then? Especially with another club potentially cannibalizing them. But another thing with you know, I've never been to Brisbane myself, but
That's
obviously,
blasphemy, mate. What are you talking
I
about? You never been to Brisbane?
think we're lucky stars.
You going to
No,
hell.
my problem is obviously you need a new stadium for a third team, right? Or wrong?
It would be weird to try and have three teams all playing out of Suncorp on the rotation. But I mean, I'm trying to think, it's not really in Sydney either. I mean, Allianz, the Roosters have just got that. And then, yeah, I guess a core, right? They sort of spread out because they all have second venues.
Yeah, no, I think it is. Sydney does it well with the geographical spread of, and and that builds the local fan bases. I couldn't see a third team working at Suncorp. Um, and I know the Dolphins play at KO a couple games, but in Redcliffe, but they're really a Suncorp team as well. So you would cannibalize their base by bringing in a third team to play out of there as well. So hopefully, waiting for as soon as a new stadium gets the go ahead from a government up there, then you'd start talking about an Ipswich team surely. But the other thing to worry about with Ipswich is there is a lot of talk of it's the fastest growing region, it's a growth corridor, but I looked it up just before. It's a population of 250,000 people, and I think the A League with their last expansion, if you to take anything from that, they went to Macarthur and West Melbourne, which are the other two biggest growth regions in the country, with the same philosophy of in 20 years, 30 years time, this will look a lot better. But I think they jumped the gun massively to where the population just isn't there to sustain a team with reasonable crowds, especially for the NRL's loftier expectations. So I'd be very wary of going to Ipswich without a stadium number one, and even just a decade's time of more people moving there and more development in the area itself. So yeah,
No,
a second New Zealand team is top of my list, and then there's a big gap between the rest, I think.
No, I'm totally with you on that one. I'd rather put one in like Fiji or do like some conjoined Pacific team like the Super Rugby tried to do, even though that's not a fantastic idea either. But I think I'd even rather do that. I mean, growing up in Brisbane, I think it's awesome that there's now a crosstown rivalry. But I really just don't feel I understand this threat of AFL, but I just don't think it needs it. Like I just don't think it would make sense to put another team there. You've got this awesome rivalry that is building between the Broncos and Dolphins. You've got the Titans who are just an hour down the road. Like I don't see how you do a fourth team, no matter how much you're building.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's one to wait on. Maybe post Olympics, see what the chat is, and go from there. But also with other options, I'm curious what you think of Adelaide number one.
Yeah, that's the forgotten one, isn't it? No one really speaks about Adelaide anymore. The old Rams,
Yeah,
back in the day. Well, mate, I originally was always for that too, but I just get the feeling that there's not a push for it. Like, I think I'm not sure which club these days does it. The Roosters. There's one NRL team that takes a game there every year, or was taking a game there every year, or maybe it was the Bulldogs. I would love to see it to make it a truly national competition because that is the city that's going to be glaringly obviously not in there once Perth is in there. I'd love to see it, but I guess it really would depend on, like they did with the WA government. You probably do need some sort of backing, whether it's the government or a private bidder. But I haven't heard much news about any private investment coming out of Adelaide from an NRL team. So as much as I
Mm,
think I'd like to see it as a that point of view, I think you do need to have a little bit of support. And at least with Perth, there was originally a private consortium, I think, who was also interested, and then the government was interested as well. So there was some competition there for a bit of a desire for the team. So I think we just have
yeah,
to put that on the back burner until someone puts their hand up anyway. Some rich billionaire, bring on the
yeah,
NRL.
yeah, yeah. One for down the tracks. How about one more? I already know your opinion on this, but a Central Coast team.
No, no, Pat. No more New
But
South Wales teams. There's too many here as there is. If you really want one there, actually, now that I live here, to be fair, I always used to be like, yeah, relocate the Tigers or relocate the Sharks. But now that I live here, I'm like, you can't relocate any of the teams that are in Sydney, but you also can't add any teams in New South Wales in general because there's enough teams here and expansion should be expanding into a significantly bigger region, in my opinion.
no, that's fair. That's fair. I would say though, if outside of the second New Zealand team, if any of those other options were to stack up first, it would comfortably be Central Coast with the stadium and the natural interest in league and the growing population as well, which is already at like 500,000 plus people. You'd get the bigger crowds going home and away games against the Sydney teams. From an NRL, from a Peter V'landys perspective, I think it would stack up. But obviously, you couldn't do that before expanding the footprint of the game, especially New Zealand. I think with the the state of Super Rugby, how it is now, and the momentum behind the Warriors and everything, it's just the right time to do it, isn't it?
It is. And look, and the NRL in general is like the AFL as well. They're both just riding this post-COVID high when they were both in so much danger of losing money and debt and going bankrupt or whatever it was. They've both bounced back and their crowds have just basically grown every year. The NRL 2 weekends ago just had their highest averaging attendance weekend ever, or at least in a very, very long time. So it's awesome to see. I've been keeping a close eye on crowds this year. There's been some sort of down weeks, as you've probably seen as well, but for the most part, I mean, that record Easter crowd for the Bulldogs game,
Mm.
like awesome scenes to see things like that. And I just think that they are in the right position at the moment. And doing all this expansion is working out amazingly. Mate, before I let you go too, have to get your touch your brain on your Tigers, obviously going very well. A pretty exciting Golden Point win. And I did a whole podcast already on Lachlan Galvin, so probably don't need too much to talk on him. But you must be
Yeah,
feeling pretty happy that you look like right in the mix for the top eight this year.
100%, 100%. I think when you look at all of our games, we've even though it's a 50-50 win-loss record, every game we've been more or less in it, or robbed, of course.
Well, always getting robbed, aren't you?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not just Luai joining the team. It's so many others as well. Like Terrell May. Every time I watch him, I just wonder how the Roosters let him go and how he ended up at the Tigers as well.
Craziest decision that I know that there's obviously way more to the story, but it's just insane. He is just about the form player and the well, him and Payne Haas, which is crazy to think about. And as a New South Wales fan, you must be absolutely licking your lips to think that Payne Haas and May could be lining up
Yeah,
on your front row because that is a ridiculous front row.
100%. Yeah, but no, to the Tigers. That's my one of my biggest regrets not being in Sydney is missing out on um, the journeys to Leichhardt and just seeing the vibe and the atmosphere around the team. I'm sure it's lifted from the last 5, 10, 15 years almost.
Wait, we
So
watched them beat the Titans last year, didn't we? Wasn't it?
yeah, we were down there for that upset, but it doesn't hit the same when you're already
Shit.
bottom two guaranteed for the season.
We saw someone sliding down the mud down the hill. That's all you want in a Leichhardt game.
Yeah,
A
that's how
win's
you
just a
know.
bonus.
Exactly right. That's it.
Yeah, look, they're looking really good, mate. So I think they'd be right in the mix. And this Lockie Galvin noise you'd think would die down for a bit. I mean, I don't think he'll be there next season, but when he's on the field, geez, you know that he's an absolute gun. So bringing him back into the team surely can't
Yeah,
get dropped again.
I think. yeah, it was the right decision in the end. So props to Benji for doing that. And yeah, I think it was always going to be a bit of a circus for the first couple weeks, and that's just natural how like the footy news pipeline goes, I think. But I'm sure he'll play, majority of this year with us, and hopefully, does well for us this year, and then he'll surely be gone after that. But you got to use him while he's here.
100%, man. And I think they just had to send a message in that first week. And Benji's pretty smart. I think it was probably just the right decision for the team, the players, and even Galvin himself. And I think it all paid off. That was a cracker. Look, Pat, very exciting. And we're going to see each other very soon. Of course, I'll be covering State of Origin Game 2 in Perth, which is fast
Yes,
approaching. Have you got your ticket, mate?
really, mate. Thank you for the reminder. I'll get onto it ASAP.
You better get your ticket. I'll be at the game. We'll be catching up. I'll see if I can sit near you. I don't know. Um, did it sell out last time? I don't remember.
It did sell out
It
last
did.
time. Um, Last time I checked it, it wasn't selling out this time, and the tickets were actually cheaper as well. So,
Is that right? Because
um,
I think it's every 2 or 3 years they're doing it currently at Optus Stadium.
weren't they there last year?
I thought it was every 2 years. I could be wrong.
I think they were here last year because I was going to go, and then well, see, this is the thing with Perth. A couple months of no one to speak to about rugby league, and all of a sudden I'm at soccer training on a Wednesday instead of State of Origin one, wondering what I'm doing with my life.
That's how you know that you're not in a rugby league territory. Because when we have OzTag or soccer or anything in a Sydney or a Brisbane on a Wednesday and an Origin night, there's no chance in hell that thing's going ahead.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah,
But yeah, no, I'm excited. I've never been to Perth and I've never been to Optus Stadium, obviously. And I've watched State of Origin, at the MCG, which was an awesome experience. One year when they got 90 plus thousand. I've obviously watched it sell out to the core and heaps of sellouts at Suncorp growing up as a kid. But I'm very interested to see what it's like over there because the stadium looks amazing on TV. So I'm pretty keen to check it out for
yeah,
myself.
definitely cool stadium, and I'm just curious to see what it's like playing obviously rectangular shaped footy in a oval shaped stadium. But sometimes it can be good when, especially when it's like a big crowd. But I also wouldn't be surprised if there's a feeling of emptiness as well.
No, I remember the only thing I can compare it to, I'm trying to think, it might have been 2018 and it was the game at the MCG. I went down there to visit a mate. We went to the game and it is weird because you're so far away from the action when you're trying to put a rectangle in an oval stadium. And when you're in a sort of footy neutral, well, non-NRL state, there is a lot of sense that it's not the passionate cheering, it's more like an event cheering. You can tell the difference when you've been to Brisbane and Sydney, you grow up in Queensland and grow up going to games in Brisbane, and then you come as a Queenslander to Sydney. You get the feeling. And I remember at the MCG thinking, "Oh wow, 90,000 people," but it still doesn't sound as passionate as those 50,000 at Suncorp or the 80,000 at the core.
Definitely, yeah. But that's to be expected as well.
Of course. And it'll be very happy to see you. Obviously, be very sad when you go down like 20, 30 nil, whatever it might be, or confident this year, mate.
Oh, mate, you said it yourself. Tyrell May, Payne Haas. Um, one thing I think for you guys is poor Ponga's having a bit of a shock.
Yeah. Geez, I haven't got too much into Origin chat on these potties yet, but I am a little bit concerned because Reece Walsh, I wouldn't have picked him anyway. And then I thought Ponga started the season really well, like 2 or 3 games in, but just because the Knights have been so terrible in their attack, he has not had a chance. And being a Supercoach Classic and draft owner of Ponga, I'm very aware of how average he has been for the last couple months now.
Yeah,
So that's concerning. Harry Grant at hooker only just going to be fit in time by the look of it. The only shining light is probably that we have Cam Munster and Cherry Evans who are looking pretty good. Um, but take that away, and then there's a lot of spots up for grabs in the forwards. Even the outside backs don't really pick themselves at the moment. So it's going to be an interesting team. And
mm,
I think you guys, well, it's going to be interesting to you as well because I'd be picking Teddy at the moment, but Dylan Edwards was the one who finished it off last year. So.
yeah. Well, I think you guys like the underdog tag, anyways. It suits you guys fine. So that I don't think will bother anyone in Queensland Origin camp.
Well, he did win the series last year, so we are underdogs.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know. We'll see what happens this year, but I'm quietly confident, I think.
Well, it is first game at Suncorp, right? Yeah, first game at Suncorp, second in Perth, and third the decider in Sydney.
Wow.
So it'll be 2-0.
2-0 before the decider. Well, you know what? If I, it's a win-win for me because if Queensland win while we're in Perth, then I get to have a good night with you. Otherwise, I know it'll be a quiet ride home, back to the back to the hotel in tears if Queensland lose.
Look, I'll be working for Fox Sports News anyway, Pat, and I'm very professional, so you won't get to see it either way. It's not going to matter. Um, But look, mate, thank you very much for joining me on Season Ticket Holders. It's been awesome even just catching up with you. And I really was interested to hear, a person's perspective when you have seen what it's like to live in a rugby league mad, stranglehold sort of place and then being over there. So I think you provided plenty of good insight. And we had these chats for fun millions of times anyway. So now I've just done it for the first time officially. But it's been awesome, Paddy. So thanks a lot for joining me.
No, thank you for having me. That was good fun.
Awesome fun, mate. I can't wait to see you in Perth. Game two, State of Origin. Bring it on, Queensland. Let's go, baby.
Alrighty, I'll
Yeah,
see
he
you.
he's ready to go now. All right, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for joining me. Have plenty of fun again. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye bye.